Well, welcome everybody to Bear Analytics Event Insight Series and our webinar today. We're definitely looking forward to it, as always. My name is Eric Missick. I'm the VP and co-founder here at Bear Analytics, and then I'm joined by our CEO and other co-founder, Joe Colangelo, who's also on the line, will be leading today's
Hey, everybody.
discussion. And we have a special guest, a man that really needs no introduction, as you could tell by his background there. He's got a Batman doppelganger there, and some other fun stuff in his background. Chris Bonifati, who's the Director of Attendee Services at the American Pet Products Association. They put on the Global Pet Expo, which is a very exciting show, and Chris is going to tell you all about that in a second. But as today's discussion goes on, if you have any questions during the webinar, feel free, please put them in the chat. We'll get to them along the way. We want to have an open dialogue, open discussion, make sure everything gets answered as they pop up. So with that, I'm going to go hand it over to Joe, who's going to lead us through today's lively discussion.
Thanks, Eric. And if you wouldn't mind popping in the survey link into the chat. So we have our return to live survey. It takes about 4 minutes if you're really trying to go nuts to answer. In reality, it's probably about a minute or two. Please fill that out. We're trying to get as many opinions and views from the marketplace as possible as folks kind of return to live, which is one of our focal discussion points today. We're going to pick one $100 winner to Amazon, the Jeff Bezos store, and we're also going to share all of our findings with those that actually submit a survey response. So last bit of housekeeping there, and I'll just reiterate what Eric said. Please, please, please put questions in the chat. We're going to get to them in near real time. All right. Chris, Director of Attendee Services, Global Pet Expo. Let's get 2 minutes. Who are you? What's Global Pet Expo? Who are on both sides of the aisle? Please introduce yourself. And I think we got him frozen.
Whoa. Yeah, I know he was having some internet issues a second ago, so hopefully.
All right. Well, the good news is we know a little bit about Chris already. So I think he's going to rejoin here in a second. So in terms of Global Pet Expo, they're really focused on bringing together, as you see there, the pet care community. And so when Chris rejoins, I'm not going to speak for him completely because you really want to get a sense of how the pandemic has also influenced his industry. We're going to want to get that out of him as well. But he really oversees marketing as the Director of Attendee Services. And so he and his team are responsible for mainly an audience acquisition capacity, but we're actually going to spend a little bit of time today talking about how they helped to also support the exhibit sales and sponsorship activities for their organization at Global Pet with the Global Pet Expo. He's freshly coming off his 2022 show. It was at the end of March, and one of the interesting things that with his show as well is in 2020 they actually were able to squeeze their show in. So they actually were able to have one of the last meaningful live event shows of 2020. And so the dynamic between going from an in-person show, then to a virtual event, back to an in-person show is one of the things that we want to walk him through. And he's just pinging me now, so I think we just need another second here. Apologies to those on the call. Of course, our webinar prep went smashingly, and we didn't have any technical issues, but this is why.
Chalk it up. Chalk it up to he had some apartment issues. He had a gas line blow or something the other day, so maybe they got into the Wi-Fi too. So
yeah, no, he no joke said he did have a gas leak on Tuesday during our pre-call. All right, let me see if I can get him in here now. 1 second. Oh, sorry, it looks like he got bounced out again. All right, Eric, let's just bounce to, so instead of us having dead air, let's talk a little bit about what we're hearing and seeing in the marketplace right now, because this is where we were going to go for our June webinar, but we might as well just jump on this and see if we can get Chris on here in short order, or we might have to reschedule this guy.
Sure. So what did you want to jump into here?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, let's talk a little bit about the, we're hearing an increase in needs around sponsorship analytics, if you want to set the table there, and I'm happy to comment on what we're seeing some folks doing for those on the call.
Sure, yeah, I think what we're hearing, it looks like Chris might be jumping on, is that we've been hearing folks really need a transparency in terms of getting back to exhibitors and sponsors to help them better understand the impact on their brand at the event, and specifically on the post-show results coming off an event. So it seems to be that folks are, exhibitors are having, trying to be careful with their budget, getting back to live events, especially because of the costs associated with those, but they want to make sure they're choosing the events that are going to give the biggest impact on their spend, that ROI question that people continue to get on the event side. So we're trying to address that with our clients, and I think Joe's going to showcase what we're doing there and what we're kind of guiding our clients to.
Yeah, I think this is maybe I'm misremembering, but at any point in the past, I think we've gotten more sponsorship data questions or inquiries, more so than we may have ever had in the past. It's usually previously focused a lot on the more traditional exhibitor sales experience, but now it seems like there's a shift in dollars on the exhibitor side to more digital sponsorships. Certainly a return to kind of more physical sponsorships relative to the last 2 years, but being able to, like you mentioned, Eric, justify the ROI from a digital perspective seems to be a bigger need than perhaps ever before. I mean, we're really just talking about what we've heard in the last 30 to 45 days, so I don't know if I want to cement that as law yet. We'll certainly learn more over the next month or two, but I'm curious for those on the call, if you could put your comments or any questions in the chat. Are you also seeing something similar from your peers? If you haven't had your event yet, or leading into your event, or some of your exhibitors, curious about what the return on investment is for some of these sponsorships that they're either interested in or have actively signed up for. That would certainly help to kind of color some of today's discussion. I think the other data point that we were talking about, earlier in the week, is how to navigate around participation when there's still company level or organization level travel restrictions. We've heard some folks say that they've been able to navigate around that successfully and I think Chris is going to talk a little bit about this as well when we get him back, by using some of the areas.
Oh, yes, he's back. I think he's just getting himself lined up for some song there.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, but we can see.
We're halfway home.
How about now?
Perfect.
There you go.
As soon as we start, we're in this call for half an hour, and then as soon as we start, I've also got, if I go out again, I'm going to call in. So I've got the dial-in options. I'm hoping we're good. It's a problem with Optimum, of course.
Shout out to Optimum. All right.
They're our sponsor today. Optimum.
Yeah.
Thank you, Optimum Internet.
Yeah, for anyone that's got internet in the greater New York, Connecticut area from Optimum, thank you very much for unpowering this webinar. All right, Chris, we got about 80 minutes of content in about 20 more minutes, so let's dive right into it.
Let's go
Talk
right
a little bit about Global Pet Expo, and then let's go into what did 2020 look like, 2021, and now 2022.
Right. So some background, I'll shoot through the background real quick. Global Pet Expo is a B2B trade show for pet products. So think Kong, Blue Buffalo, Nestle Purina. Those are our exhibitors. Our attendees are buyers like PetSmart, Petco, Walmart, Target, etc. So we kind of had the golden goose of trade show dates, where our 2020 show was right at the end of February, the last week of February. So we got in right before the pandemic started shutting things down. In fact, we had a very interesting show because usually there's a large presence of Asian exhibitors and buyers at our show. They have their own association over there in China called SIPS, and we sort of partner with them because there's a lot of international trade that goes on in the pet industry. And it was a weird show because they weren't able to attend because the COVID-19 virus was sort of in its peak over there in China. But we still had a show, snuck it in there, and did pretty well domestically. 2021 comes around, and like everybody else, we had to do a digital show. And that was a nightmare, as I imagine most people who run physical events had a difficult time sort of handling that sort of digital scape, and how do we get our exhibitors the same amount of benefit that they would receive from a physical event. And that was an impossible ask, and I think a lot of people learned that it's impossible to replicate a physical event and the value offered by a physical event over the internet. I mean, just look at me over here losing internet connection for 10 minutes. That doesn't happen when you're in person. And in 2022, we just had our show back in March, and we were sort of perfectly timed again. We were sort of in one of the valleys. We have our show down in Orlando, Florida, and we were in one of the valleys of Omicron, where things were going down. And as a result, we had a really great turnout. But the past 3 years, like everybody else, has been really weird. Lots of ebbs and flows, and it's been challenging to navigate.
Well, hold on. You're telling a little bit of a prettier story. Let's take it back to the Chris of January, when things weren't maybe so rosy. What did it look like? I don't know if there was too many high fives at the APPA offices or at home at that point. So walk the audience through, what that looked like, because I think your trajectory into an ultimately successful event, running out of lanyards, was a tenuous one. Is that a fair statement?
Tenuous is a great word. And I think the lanyard story, it's sort of like, it's the perfect storm, because with the COVID impacting the supply lines, we needed to order the lanyards really early. So we ordered those back in the beginning of like the first week of January when we were all back from holiday. And we were looking at our projected numbers, and we were about 50% down across the board. In every registration category other than our exhibitors. And we'll get to sort of how we brought those exhibitors in a bit. But we were about 50% down across the board. So when we placed the order, I thought, okay, we'll order, I think it ended up being about 14,000 lanyards. And we'll have extra. That was the thinking. Like, we will have extra and we'll just keep them down there in Orlando. We'll use them next year. But as things sort of progressed, the landscape changed, and we sort of attained what I call trade show momentum, where more exhibitors came in and they brought their customers, and some of their customers were bigger box stores. And when somebody competing with that sees that they're going, now they're going, and it sort of becomes like that domino effect, that momentum that carried us into March. And the week before the show, we had, I was saying to the team I work with at Bear and Bear IQ, our goal isn't to break any records this year. We're not breaking any records this year. We just want to have a productive show. We ended up breaking a record. We had our highest 1 week registration peak. We had about 1,100 people come in the last week of that registration was open right before the show. So we did actually end up breaking a record, and it has to do with that sort of positive push, that positive momentum that carried us from the end of February into March.
So let's talk a little bit about that momentum and unpack that a little bit, because on last week's webinar, on the NAHB Denise Miller webinar, both Denise and Paul, they said, we really used audience to drive exhibitors and retain exhibitors. You guys took a little bit of a different approach. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So what's interesting about the pet industry is we, and when I say we, I mean as an industry, did really well through the pandemic. The sale of pets were up, pet ownership was up, people were spending more money on their pets. So we were sort of in this unique position where our members and exhibitors, they had the funds to invest at a trade show. So that sale becomes a lot easier because we're not trying to sell somebody to move budgeting money around or really trying to squeeze them when their bottom line has already been hurt. We were in a position where we could go after our bellwether and anchor exhibitors, those big 80 by 80 islands that sort of make Global Pet Expo, the landscape of it, right? It's like the skyline of Global Pet Expo, those kinds of booths. And we were able to get them in very early. And basically, it's like the big fish thing, where when the big fish does well, it could actually sustain all the small fish around it. So, for example, Blue Buffalo is a company I'm sure everybody's familiar with. They get a huge 80 by 80 booth. They practically build an apartment on the show floor. And everybody wants to be near that booth because they know that attendees are going to visit it. So once we were able to get those bigger booths in, the smaller booths that always sort of leech around them, they came in, and then the customers of those companies come in. So I know a lot of sales strategies throughout the pandemic was try and get the attendees in and make that pitch to your members or exhibitors like, hey, we've got buyers showing up. Now is the time to invest. But we actually went the opposite way, where we had buy-in from our biggest and best exhibitors, and we were able to turn that into a sales strategy for convincing the buyers to make the trip.
So let's talk a little bit about that, the buyers, the segments of buyers that you're attracting to make that trip. The geographic tactics that you used and how this year's event kind of ultimately came together. Let's get into a little bit more of like the tactics that you and your team had to drive on to make that happen.
Yeah, we had a very interesting geographic spread this year. Typically, our largest demographic for buyers is independent pet stores in Florida. We're an Orlando-based show, so naturally you'd think, hey, if I could drive there. And another background thing, our event is free for the buyers. They don't have to pay to attend. So if you're a pet store owner in Fort Lauderdale, you're going to make that 2-hour drive up to Orlando to come to the show. This year, we actually weren't bringing those people in, and not even as a final result, it's still the biggest deficit. And we were having a hard time locating who is still in business, who wasn't impacted horribly by the pandemic, and who actually has a reasonable chance to attend. So early on in the strategy, we actually made a conscious decision to avoid Florida. And we went out towards New York, California, and Texas first, because we knew that it would take a much larger buy-in to get those people to travel. And they do represent a large demographic, a huge number. I think it's maybe close to 40% of our attendees come from Florida, New York, Texas, and California. And we're an international show too. So there's all sorts of people coming in. And what we looked at was who is most likely to attend if things are, worst case scenario, if we need to have a vaccine mandate or a mask mandate. And so we paired survey data that we had acquired through surveying our potential attendees with data from Bear IQ to sort of create that hot list of people that we really thought would be the lowest hanging fruit. Because again, the idea was gain momentum, get the first 1,000 people through the door, and then you can say we've got 1,000 people, and that all becomes ammunition down the belt. So what we did is we identified the lowest hanging fruit, made a concerted effort to go after them, and then used their presence and their registration for the show as a sales tool going forward.
So this was, your words here, your most data. Sorry,
we got a question.
Sorry,
guys.
There we go.
We got a question regarding incorporating virtual event data back to the in-person. Like, how did you guys do that? What was the secret there?
Yeah, so doing the virtual event, it taught us a lot. And one thing we learned is we aren't collecting enough data at registration. One of the few things that I actually enjoyed about the digital show is seeing all the engagement metrics. you could actually track the attendee's journey, and that's sort of like the ultimate dream of any event marketer, is being able to truly put yourself in the shoes of somebody and understand what they're doing at the show and what they're trying to accomplish. And with a digital show, that's all trackable because of clicks and leads and engagement. So we basically tried to create a similar thing in our registration. So at registration, we asked a few more pointed questions, and in particular, about some of the events that people plan on attending, at the events that we run, whether that's seminar education, networking events, meetups, etc. And what that helped us do was create a more robust understanding of the personas that we've built. Understanding what exactly the difference between a buyer from Target and a buyer from mom and pop's pet shop, in their intention and their activity and their behavior. What we've done now is decided that those two personas deserve independent messaging. Mom and pop care a lot more about attending the educational conferences and maximizing their time on the show floor, where the buyer from Target cares a lot more about networking and they value the industry experience a bit more. And so while I hope we never have to go back to doing a digital event, it did show us that collecting pointed information, not asking questions just for the sake of asking questions, but having an intent behind those questions and delivering it right at registration, so attendees really don't have a choice but to give you that information. It sort of created a more robust profile that we're going to be able to carry forward.
Interesting. Yeah, that's I think a lot of times people are thinking about virtual, like you said, maybe we don't want to go back, or only certain components of our event will go back to having a digital kind of presence, but really about how do I carry over that intelligence, because it's a lot of times people say that they're going to do something and they do something completely different. You can mold that into, like you said, the persona for the marketing and content, right? So
yeah,
it's interesting.
One of the things I always say is don't ask a question if you don't know what you're going to do with the answer, right? So whenever we're sort of trying to figure out what are we going to put on the forms this year, or even if my boss or a board member asks me something about the data, I always ask, well, what are you going to do with the answer? Because if the answer becomes, oh, I'm just curious, that's nothing. Curiosity doesn't get anything done. You should know, okay, if the answer returns an overwhelming yes or an overwhelming no, or they're rating us high here or low here, what's going to change? Are we going to change the marketing strategy? Are we going to change the way we operate? How is the answer to the question actually going to impact our business? So that's an important first step that's going to set you up for success down the line.
So Chris, you're talking about data enablement here. And so I'm curious, if we go back a couple months and you're in this tight window where you're starting to generate momentum, but you're still behind, even the 8 ball against the goals, against the lanyard order, which is kind of the unofficial goal, right? How do you take, and how did you enable this with the team as information was coming in, as you were starting to see some success on the marketing? How did you pivot your messaging and operationalize it to really juice that momentum? Because I don't think it, some of it kind of happened to you, but you really primed the pump for a lot of it. So for those who are maybe in a, we have a lot of folks that are in like in a marketing and audience capacity on the call here, maybe giving them some of your words of wisdom. And then I have a follow-up question after that, but go right ahead.
I think the biggest advice is, a tale as old as time. Keep it short and simple. If you want to understand what is resonating with your attendees, you cannot send them a laundry list email. How will you know what information in that laundry list actually resonated with your audience? So what we discovered leading up to the event is buyers were largely making their decision to attend based on the exhibitor list. So we started sending our leads, our unregistered hot leads, the list of exhibitors who just signed up that week as well. Here's the 20 exhibitors who just signed up for Global Pet Expo. Will you be there? And that's the entire piece. Because why inundate them with all these other show features that don't sell them? They don't care about the educational seminars. They don't care about the new products. what's turning the dial for them, what's really flipping the switch and getting them to register and verify is the people coming into the show. So I think that's just like a small example, but it's all lessons learned, and you have to stay flexible and agile. And the only way to do that is if you're actually able to draw conclusions from what you're doing. So keep it simple, keep it pointed, and if something's not working, don't keep sending it out just because that's what we always have done, right? If something isn't working, it might be time to try a different strategy.
No, that's great. That's great advice. We're wrapping it up on 5 minutes here. Eric, anything else in the Q&A log?
We did get one, which I think goes along with what you just said, Chris, asking about how are you doing, or are you doing omni-channel marketing?
Yeah, omni-channel marketing is really important, especially in today's day of social media. Even just saying social media in and of itself is omni-channel marketing, right? Because not everybody uses every single platform. My best advice for omni-channel marketing is try to make it a team effort to the best of your ability. No one person can manage all of those channels. My second piece of advice is don't treat social media as the same thing. There's a big difference between the audience on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. These are all unique platforms with pros and cons and different audiences, and you should treat them as separate channels. So if you do not have somebody who is dedicated to managing social media marketing, that would be a great place to start, because understanding the differences there can really add to your portfolio, because I'm sure everybody in this audience is already sending emails and already leveraging telemarketers and already doing print pieces. But it's time to, instead of just roping and pooling social media as one thing, understanding that it is a diverse ecosystem and needs to be treated as such.
Yeah.
Oh, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. We're rounding out here. If there's any questions, please throw them in the chat. We're happy to get with them, Chris. I think we're going to have you back because I know there's a couple items that we didn't get to. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. We're here doing this every Wednesday. We got Rachel Wimberly next week. We got Julie Parsons the week after. We're talking post-event reports the week after that. I can't even wait to release to you the June. There's not enough room on the slide. June's going to be crazy. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you want to learn how to become like Chris, number one thing, a lot more Star Wars toys. Number two thing, we'll jump on and do a free data assessment. You can contact Eric. We got 5 slots left available for our quota in May. Any other parting words, gents?
Sure.
I think it was great to have you. I mean, go ahead, Chris. I was going to say, shout out to everything you shared in a short amount of time. But
yeah. First off, I apologize for my internet deciding to just die right as we begun. Second of all, feel free to reach out to Joe or Eric to get my contact information if you have any follow-up questions. I actually genuinely enjoy talking about this stuff because I'm a weird nerd. So if you'd like to reach out to me because you have a more pointed question or would like to start a discussion, that's absolutely fine. This is a complicated multi-step process that our association has been working on for, I think, about 5 years now. So don't expect it all to happen overnight, but the most important thing to do is take that first step.
Wise words. Wise words from a guy on May the 4th that believes in Star Wars. So the Force is with him. We hope it's with everybody else. And we hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll see you next week, same time. All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it, man. Good talking to you.
Thanks for having me on.
You got it.